Hello art friends, I'm Anoosha Syed, your resident illustrator extraordinaire, and today we are going to be talking about dreams. Specifically, talking about the concept of dream jobs, the pressure to succeed, and the fear of failure. Something a little different, something a little cheesier, whatever, definitely not my usual content, but I had wanted to make this video for quite a while now and I just kept putting it off. But a couple of days ago, I realized that this is the perfect time to talk about this. Not only because we are in the beginning of the new year, the start of 2022, but also because recently it was the anniversary of this Twitter post that I made that kind of went viral. I made this post on December 31st, 2018, 3 whole years ago, and it basically talks about why I decided to quit my dreams of working in animation. For those of you who don't know, currently I work as an award-winning children's book writer and illustrator, but for most of my life, since I was like 15, my absolute biggest dream in the world was to work in animation, specifically working as a character designer or visual development artist at a big fancy studio like Disney or Pixar. I wanted this more than anything else in the world, and I worked so hard to try to get there, but unfortunately, it just didn't work out and I got rejection after rejection after rejection. However, this video is not going to be a sad story because my decision to change my career path and go into children's illustration was the best thing that I ever did, and every day I wake up grateful that I made that choice. Although working in animation was a huge dream of mine for 10 years, it ultimately just wasn't right for me. But out of pure spite and fear of failure, I was trying to cling on to it even though it wasn't great for my career or my mental health. And making that hard decision to let that dream go ultimately was the metamorphosis I needed that made me go from an anxious little caterpillar into the super happy butterfly that I am today. Ever since I made that Twitter post about my journey, I've actually had a lot of people come up to me telling me that it really resonated with them and that it either helped them come to terms with their own career change or it gave them the boost to do it. So, because this is the new year and we're all making resolutions right now, I know that sometimes you can end up feeling a lot of pressure to fulfill and achieve your goals, or, if you're looking back at the resolutions that you made last year and you weren't able to tick some of those goals off, you might be feeling a little bit hard on yourself. But I'm hoping that after sharing my personal journey with rejection and evolution, you might look into your goals in a healthier way. So yeah, in today's video, I just wanted to share my artistic journey and career from like high school way back in like 2010 until now as a 28-year-old. I want to talk about my struggles of trying to work in animation, why I decided to change my career path, how I dealt with feelings of jealousy and insecurity, and how I ended up where I am today. But apart from that, I really wanted to discuss this sometimes toxic concept of dreams. That, yeah, it's great to have goals and it's great to want to achieve big things, but there is definitely a negative mentality that our society has in regards to giving up, or as I like to call it, evolving. So first off, I'm going to give some background information on my career path, starting from like high school, art school, etc. And then I want to talk about my series of failures, then why I made the switch, and then some advice on what to do if you're also confused about your goals. This is going to be a pretty long video, so I included all of the timestamps below. And as always, this is a video made with lots of love and care, and if you like what I do, please consider giving it a like and a follow. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's go. Let's go back in time to 2010. I'm a teenager living in Pakistan who just liked to draw. Honestly, my art wasn't really that good, especially compared to kids today who are amazingly talented. But in a small school, I was kind of known as the artist. And as a nerdy kid, of course, I was really into cartoons and stuff, and I watched them well into my teens when it really wasn't cool to do so. But I remember this very distinct moment in 10th grade when I believe I got a comment on one of my fan arts on DeviantArt and someone was like, "Wow, this looks great, you should work in animation." And that's when it kind of clicked for me that, oh right, this is a paying job that someone could have, that there is an adult out there who actually works on these movies we love. And then also around that time was when we started to see a resurgence in animation, kind of going out of like the 2000s dark ages with movies like Toy Story 3 and How to Train Your Dragon. So it was a really exciting time for animation. And then I saw Tangled in the cinema. Literally, when I tell you that Tangled single-handedly is the reason that I'm an artist today, it's unbelievable. This is still one of my all-time favorite movies, and just the experience of watching it in the cinema, I was blown away. And then especially in 3D, the floating lantern scene filled me with so much love for the medium and just like what it was capable of. And then a few months later, I found the book, The Art of Tangled, in a bookstore, and I was like, oh, what's this? This looks interesting. And again, I was blown away. Seeing all of the behind the scenes artwork, the concept art, all of the details and the research that the design team did to recreate the old Disney movie aesthetic, but doing it successfully in a CG film like it had never been done before. Seeing the inspiring work of Claire Keane, my queen. I've bought many art of books since then, and I actually did a whole video reviewing them. But Art of Tangled is still my absolute favorite one. And again, I realized that this too could be a job, being a character designer, being a visual development artist. And from then on, I was set. This was my dream. I wanted to work at Disney and help make meaningful movies like these that could inspire people. And I was ready to do whatever it took to get there. When I graduated in 2011, I really wanted to attend a big fancy school in America for animation. I really wanted to apply to Cal Arts or Sheridan, but at the time my parents didn't really want me to study too far away from home, and being brown parents, they weren't really convinced that art was a valid career option. So initially, I went to American University of Sharjah for visual communication, which is pretty much as far away from visual art you could possibly go. It was things like branding and logos for corporations. But anyway, I only lasted there for one semester and I was so miserable. I came back home feeling super dejected, and I ended up spending the rest of the year back at home. Shortly after, my family actually moved to Switzerland because of my dad's job, and I ended up moving with them because what else was I going to do? There, I enrolled in Ceruleum École d'Arts Visuelles since it was the only school in the area with an animation program. Unfortunately, the art school was taught entirely in French, and while I did learn French in school, I definitely wasn't fluent at all. So even though I wanted to join their animation degree, I was placed into Ceruleum's 3-year illustration program instead. The reasoning was that the animation classes would have been way too technical, and I'd have a harder time understanding anything going on, but I could probably survive in illustration. I was told that if I practiced my French and got better at it, next year I could switch over to animation. Obviously, this was a bit of a setback, but it actually kind of ended up working out for the best. I really enjoyed my time in my illustration classes, and as I researched more into the animation industry and like kind of what I wanted to do, I became more sure that I wanted to be a visual development artist, not an animator. And I felt that maybe my illustration classes would be better suited to build my design portfolio rather than the animation program, which was really all actual like 2D animating and no design classes. So for 3 years, I worked my butt off in the illustration program, and when I got home from school, I focused all of my time on studying books and artists and working on my animation portfolio. During my school years, I would try to apply to art and animation internships. For example, both DreamWorks and Disney have a yearly summer internship program. However, because I was an international student, I didn't really qualify for them. In terms of my art school experience, I'll probably make a whole other video for it another day if you guys are interested, but all in all, I wasn't super happy with my time. There were definitely good parts to it. For one, it was a really small school. My graduating class was literally 5 people. So there was a lot of attention from teachers, and I was able to have a strong relationship with my classmates. They also allowed a lot of creative freedom in interpreting assignments. So I would try to modify all of my school assignments to be centered around visual development so I could create more portfolio pieces. Like for example, if there was an assignment involved where we would have to draw some animals at the zoo, I would take it one step further and do a character design sheet of those animals. However, there were a lot of negatives as well. Like I felt like I didn't really learn much in school and was kind of forced to do a lot of self-learning in my own time to make up for it. Especially in terms of the business side of art, like how to market yourself, how to find work, or even how to create a website portfolio. And the reason I'm bringing up all of this school stuff is because I kind of became a little spiteful of my school experience. I would see other artists my age going to schools like CalArts and Gobelins and having access to all of these resources and professors and networking opportunities and job fairs and creating these gorgeous short films. And so even at 19, I already felt like I was falling behind. And obviously, going to these schools doesn't guarantee you a job. And there are so many industry artists who have gone to other schools all across the world, and some who are even self-taught. I mean, eventually I turned out okay too. But my point is that I felt like at the time I didn't have the same access to resources and education that other people had. And I felt like I was in last place and struggling to catch up with everyone else. However, in school at Ceruleum was where I first started to get a taste of a life of an illustrator. So I was really into mid-century animation from the 1950s and artists like Mary Blair, and absolutely devouring all of her concept art and then her books. And so eventually, I looked into other mid-century picture book illustrators of the time, like the Provinsons, J.P. Miller, and M. Sasek. And it really ended up influencing my art style, and I started to create more illustration pieces that were geared towards children's books rather than animation. And then when I got into my third and final year of school, we had to create a thesis project. So I decided to write and illustrate a whole picture book. This book was Chip and the Rainy Day, which I am still kind of proud of to this day. When I completed this book, I was like, what if I tried to get this published? Of course, back then I had no idea how the publishing industry worked, and while I did try to submit it to publishers, I found out that most publishers don't accept unsolicited submissions, and they require that an illustrator have an agent. And so meanwhile, while all of this was going on, I'm still applying to internships and getting rejections, and I'm getting closer to graduation, and so I also start to apply to full-time positions as well. For context, this is the portfolio that I submitted that I worked on in my personal time. This was an original concept I did visual development for, including examples of character design and prop design. And while there are a couple of decent pieces in there that I'm still happy with, all in all, I completely understand why it was rejected. My art just wasn't at a professional standard yet. So, since I was applying to job listings anyway, and I had this book on hand, I thought, okay, why not see if I can try to get an illustration so I can publish this dang book? And so I applied to 30 different agencies, and I was pretty much rejected by every single one of them except for one, and I ended up joining them. Anyway, yes, I had an illustration agent. You can kind of see that it sort of just happened. I wasn't really focused on making illustration my career, but within 2 months of joining this agency, I actually started to get a couple of jobs through them, and I started to work on some books because why not? So in May of 2015, I graduated from Ceruleum, and shortly after I moved to Canada, mostly because I knew that Toronto had a lot of opportunities for animations, more so than Switzerland. Over the summer, I worked on a couple of books with my agency, and after applying to a bunch of studios in Toronto, by November, I had my very first job in animation at Industrial Brothers. At Industrial Brothers, I was working as a concept artist on the preschool show Dot, and it was a pretty fun experience. It was a really great first job. And so for a year, I would work 9 to 5 working at my job in animation, and then after a horrible 90-minute commute, come home and then work on my illustration freelance work until midnight. I can't even imagine doing this now, working all day at work and then working again at home. I wish I had that stamina, but I'm also glad that I have much better work-life balance. But anyway, after a year working at the studio though, I eventually made the decision to leave my job. At that time, unfortunately, I was starting to have some issues with anxiety and panic attacks, and I was having a hard time going to work, and I just really needed the time off. So after I left my job, in my time at home with the support of my family, I decided to start freelancing full-time. And I was slowly starting to enjoy children's illustration more and more, but I didn't want it to distract me away from my dreams of animation. And so after a little break and reworking my design portfolio, I began to apply to studios again. For the next 2 years, this just became an endless cycle of me applying to animation studios whenever a new position came up, reworking my portfolio, and repeat. I applied for visual development, color design, character design, prop design, background paint, literally anything within like the art area of animation. You can see my little folder here where I have all of my old resumes and CVs in a big hoard, all rejected. I don't even know how many positions I applied for in the end. And it was either like an endless stream of rejections or total silence, which was even worse since you were just waiting for nothing. And of course, the rejection was super frustrating. I was putting in all of this work and I thought that I was doing everything right that people told you were supposed to do. I thought I had a solid portfolio. I attended animation industry events like CTN in LA every year, where I show off my work at the Artist Alley, do portfolio reviews with industry professionals, attending panels and network with other creators there. Even though I grew up outside of North America and I didn't really have access to networking resources in school, through social media, I was able to connect with other artists in the industry and really involve myself within the animation community. And I ended up making a lot of friends. I connected with recruiters and art directors and was having regular conversation with them. Basically, I had all of the networking part covered. However, although I thought I was doing everything right, the main issue was my portfolio, the most important component. I just didn't realize it then. First of all, like I said, I was applying to all of these different positions, prop design, color design, whatever, but I wasn't changing my portfolio to fit the role. Like for example, if I was submitting to prop design, I would still use my general VizDev portfolio that I submitted for everything. You should always adjust your portfolio for the position. Like in this case, I should have submitted a prop portfolio. Secondly, while it does have some decent pieces in my portfolio, for the most part, it wasn't a functional design portfolio for animation. Especially for TV animation, your portfolio needs to be designed for production use, something that can actually be animated. Drawing super painterly, elaborate character designs is fun and all, but it could never be animated with TV budgets, so it's essentially useless. You need pieces that give a lot of information, which means a lot of things like turnarounds and model sheets, expression sheets, orthographics, dynamic poses, showing your characters in every angle and just making it clear how they move. But instead, my pieces were too illustrative. But like I said, I didn't make that connection yet, and instead, I just became super depressed and I had all sorts of these bad feelings. I felt insecure of my work and an absolute failure that I didn't get a single yes in 2 years. And although I was blaming myself, I also fell into the trap of blaming everything around me. Some of these traps include, I'm an international artist and studios don't want to put in the effort of hiring me and getting me a visa. That's why I'm not getting hired. Which is partly true. It is a lot harder for international artists to get visas for work, but it is still possible to get hired as an international artist, so that couldn't be the reason. Oh, schools like CalArts have a direct pipeline to studios. That's why they won't hire me. And while it's true that some schools have better resources, I already mentioned that people from all different schools or even self-taught get hired all the time. This industry is all about connections and who you know. Sure, studios will make a job posting public, but we all know it's just for show. They'll just hire from within, or artists will get jobs through their friends. And yes, while networking is a big part of the industry, again, it's not the whole story, and I'm just blaming the system instead of really examining why I'm not getting hired. And worse than the blame game is the feeling of jealousy. It's common to have a bit of envy towards your peers, like maybe being in awe of someone's art style or skill, or getting a little bit jealous when someone announces that they're working on a super cool project. I'll be the first to admit that a little bit of spite and jealousy really inspires me to work hard. However, I fell into a horrible jealousy pit. It was the kind of envy that just ate up my soul. It was so bad. Because here I was getting rejection after rejection, and then I see everyone around me getting their dream jobs. It was like every other week on Twitter, one of my friends would announce that they just got a job working at a cool studio. And it was horrible because they were my friends and I was so proud of them for their achievement and I was trying so hard to be happy for them. But I couldn't help but feel a little mad at their success and wondering, why not me? Why do you get to be happy and not me? And it didn't help that I was getting older and I felt like time was running out. Unfortunately, there is this weird mentality of ageism in the industry of like getting successful as young as possible. And if you're not a success by age 25, you're pretty much worthless. I don't really know where this came from. I think it's partly because social media really loves to highlight the wonderkins and the prodigies. It's partly because big corporations love hiring newbies fresh out of school so they can be easily exploited. And also because digital art has become a lot more accessible now, so kids are able to start drawing earlier. So you have a lot of really talented kids. And so yeah, every year we'd see a new crop of artists graduate, and with all of this fresh new talent every year, I feel my chances getting slimmer and slimmer. And then all of my friends who are in the industry working at their dream jobs would ask me how my job search is going. And they'd say that they can't believe I haven't been hired yet and that it's only a matter of time until I get picked up by a great studio. And they were being kind, but it always hurt a little bit. And yeah, I absolutely hated that feeling of jealousy. And I wish people talked about this more because I felt alone in feeling this, like I was a monster for having these emotions that no one else was having. As a side note, I'm thinking of making another video talking about bad artist feelings and talking about insecurity and jealousy and all of that and just how to tackle it. I think it's a topic that should be talked about more within our community. So if you're interested and have any ideas about it, please let me know. It took a while, but eventually I was able to control my envy by reframing my perspective. First thing to remind yourself is that everyone is different. So there is no point in comparing yourself to other people. Each of us has been given a unique set of opportunities, different privileges and hardships. So don't focus on what everyone else is doing. Your job is to do the best with what you've been given. Life isn't a race, just go at your own pace because your individual journey is unique to you. You also never know what people are going through. Social media gives a pristine, curated look into everyone's lives, and while you might be seeing someone's positive successes and comparing yourself to them, you have no idea what struggles they have behind the screen. Secondly, companies and art schools might push the mentality of scarcity and that there are only a few jobs out there and you're going to be in competition with all your peers. But that's not true. While it can be a competitive industry, there is no shortage of work, especially today when so much content is being made and it's more accessible for small creators to create their own projects. Apart from major studios, you have smaller studios across the world. Indie productions making content on Patreon and YouTube and Twitch or crowdfunding websites. Any scarcity is made up. So, when another artist gets a cool job, that doesn't affect me at all. Them getting that job doesn't mean that, in turn, I can't get a job. They're not taking anything away from me. And in any case, I want them to succeed and live their dreams and be happy, and I wouldn't want to take that from them for myself. And on another note, it's entirely possible that I'm not the right person for that particular job anyway. Maybe that artist is really good at drawing monsters, and I'm not. And there's another opportunity out there that would be a better fit for me. And finally, when you have jealousy in your heart, there's no room for gratitude. I know that there are some things in my life that I feel are missing or that there are things that I want, but I have to remind myself of what I do have. Because to someone else, that's what's missing in their lives. And I could be jealous of someone else's success and wishing I was them, but meanwhile, they're wishing they were me. The grass is always greener on the other side, right? Anyway, while I was applying to all of these studios, I was still working as a freelance illustrator. And although it started off as a side gig, I found myself enjoying it more and more. I joined a new literary agency that was a better fit for me, and we discussed the possibility of me writing my own book. I was working on several picture books and I was illustrating covers. I was starting to make these bigger leaps into this industry. However, I never fully committed myself to the job. I still spent a huge chunk of my time reworking my portfolio and sending out job applications, and overall just distancing myself from my illustrator identity so people would be fully aware that I wanted to work in animation, and illustration was just like a side thing. When people asked me about my picture books, I shrugged it off as a hobby, almost embarrassed by it, and I said that my main goal was animation. Because of this, I never fully committed to my illustration work. For example, I would purposefully avoid accepting certain book projects, especially if they were like really long schedules over like several months or years. I wouldn't want to work on more than one book at a time because I was worried that if, somehow I got a job offer next week, I would end up becoming too overwhelmed with like my freelance work and my new job. On a side note, another weird sticking point for me was that I couldn't really accept that freelancing was a valid job. But like, I know it is, but because it wasn't a traditional job that I was exposed to when I was growing up, I had like this bizarre disconnect, and I didn't really feel like what I was doing was serious. Like, sure, I was making money and I was working with clients, but I didn't really have a boss. I was like at home all day, like kind of just playing video games and drawing. I didn't have benefits, and I didn't really have a traditional salary. It was all very self-guided. So it didn't feel like a job. I think it's also partially because I'm brown and I come from a background where it's drilled into your head that the only career paths out there are engineer, lawyer, and doctor. And it didn't help that a lot of my extended family saw my freelance work as a cute little hobby. I think this was also the reason why I thought that I needed to work in a 9-to-5 job. And even now, after 5 years of freelancing, I still have to remind myself that this is a valid career. I also didn't really have friends who were working as full-time illustrators or who were freelancers. All of my friends were either freelancing part-time or they were just working full-time in animation. So I didn't have a good frame of reference for what being a full-time illustrator looked like. So although I was making a lot of progress in my illustration work, and it did start to feel like a more viable option, I couldn't bring myself to make the switch because I felt like if I had made that final leap to freelance and I completely cut myself from animation, I would be giving up. I'd be abandoning a dream that I've had for 10 years, and that to me felt worse than all of the rejections. And so I kept going, purely out of pride and spite, because I didn't want to admit to myself that I wasn't meant to work in animation. I didn't want to tell all of my peers that I was giving up. I was worried that they'd think I was a loser, that I couldn't handle it, that I was weak, that I wasn't good enough. Pride is weird. I was literally depriving myself of a possible happy future just because of what other people might think and the concept of dreams. In media, especially the stuff that I grew up with in the 90s, there was just a strong emphasis placed on dreams. Movies where someone has a dream of being a big-time baseball player and no one thinks they can do it, but through all of their hard work and believing and a fun training montage, by golly, they did it. They achieved their dream, and so can you if you just believe. I know everyone loves an underdog story and movies with a happy ending, but it was a pretty harmful mentality because media will also say that people who give up on their dreams are weak. You have to keep pursuing that dream no matter what, even if the whole world is against you, even if it kills you. So, there might be a movie where the side character has a dream of being a baseball star when he's a kid. But, he grows up and he has a family he has to support and he's working as an accountant. And then the main character looks at him and is like, "Wow, man, what happened to you? You had all these dreams and big goals. Now look at you, working at a job you hate. If you only believed and worked hard like I did, you could be a baseball star too." And here's the thing. Dreams can change because you, as a person, also change. I'm not the same person that I was 10 years ago. I'm almost unrecognizable. My goals have changed, my wants and needs, my priorities. And following that logic, your dream can change too. So for following the movie example, yes, sure, the side character once wanted to be a baseball player. But as he grew older, his needs and priorities changed, and he doesn't really want that for himself anymore. Like, for example, if he had become a baseball player, maybe he never would have met his wife, who he loves more than anything. Sure, he doesn't really love his job, but it provides for his family, who is his main priority now. He still loves baseball, but he feels like if it were a job, he'd end up hating the sport eventually. He's happy keeping it to himself as a hobby and playing with his kids and friends. He is happy where he is, and maybe his new dream is just making a nice home for himself and having a little vegetable garden. And sure, maybe it's not as glamorous as being a famous baseball player, but I don't think that dreams have to be these big, grand things. Dreams can be quiet, and that's just as important. What finally triggered the switch to illustration was an artist residency that I took in the summer of 2018. This was the Light Gray Art Lab Iceland residency, where for 10 days, you and I think 12 other artists explore Iceland and draw and collaborate and learn. This was a life-changing experience for me, and I got to spend 10 days non-stop with these super talented artists from across the world, from all sorts of different industries, and I was able to discuss what I was going through with them. And the funny thing was that a lot of people in this residency were kind of going through a pretty similar situation, where they were at a crossroads between two major life decisions, and we were all trying to figure out what to do. One example is my friend Jay. At the time, they were working in the mobile games industry after studying animation, and it just wasn't fulfilling at all, and they were at a crossroads. The good news is that they eventually did a complete career change and became a tattoo artist, and they are absolutely thriving. Like, you cannot tell me they weren't born to do this. So talented. As a side note, speaking of Light Gray Art Lab, apart from their Iceland residency, which I highly recommend, they have a bunch of smaller art retreats as well throughout the year, and they also do a bunch of group gallery shows that you can submit to. Check them out, they're very cool, I love them. But yeah, anyway, seeing other artists going through this internal battle really helped alleviate some of the concerns I was having, because it did make me feel a little less alone, knowing that other people were going through this, and it also made it clear that it was okay if my original plans were changing and that my path was headed in a different direction. So then finally I asked myself, do I even want to work full-time in animation? Okay, yes, this is a dream I've had for a decade, but if we look at all of the facts and the pros and cons, does it even really make sense for me? It can be so easy to idealize a dream without understanding what it really means for your life. First, I needed to analyze why I wanted to work in animation in the first place and figure out what is the core reason for this dream. Because somewhere along the way, the reason got muddled up with other things like pride and spite and sunk cost. But I remembered that the core reason was that I wanted to create works that mattered. I watched Tangled 10 years ago, and it made my heart soar, and it made me so inspired, and I wanted to create things that made others feel this way too. And so if this was my big reason, why did it have to be animation? If I wanted to create meaningful art, it can be done through anything. Poetry, novels, pottery, YouTube video essays, it can all have meaning. And so why can't I do that with picture books? And with picture books, I actually found that the thing that I really loved about it was that, I could create stories with meaning, and then also one specifically for children. But since I had a lot more creative control, since I could write and illustrate, and I didn't have like a big corporation telling me what to do, I could feature characters who looked like me and create stories that I wished I had when I was a kid. I found that with picture books, I could fulfill my core dream, but even better than I could have with animation. And so after figuring out my core belief, I then made a list summing up why I shouldn't work in animation. Number one, freelancing has a lot of cons that to this day I still don't like. It's very isolating, and I miss having coworkers and getting out of the house. I'm a kind of person that needs a lot of structure to function, and freelancing makes it very difficult since it's very self-guided and you have to keep yourself accountable. But all in all, there are a lot of pros for me. I love the flexibility it brings. I can choose my own hours, who I work with, and the projects that I work on. I don't have to commute, and as someone with a history of anxiety, freelancing makes it a lot easier to have a bad day and look after myself. Working full-time, it has its perks, but it wasn't really the lifestyle that I wanted. Number two, like I said, I can choose the projects that I work on. If you're working with a company, you don't really have that luxury. Number three, art of books really glamorize the job of a character designer because, like I said, it isn't always going to be all fun, illustrative, complex designs. Especially in TV animation, you are creating designs that can be animated within the budget, and because you are working within a team, you have to create informational works like turnarounds, mouse charts, etc. And honestly, I hate doing that kind of stuff. It's just not for me. I like doing the illustrative stuff instead. Of course, it's a very important job and some people are brilliant at it, but I've come to realize that it's not something I'm good at. My style is very flat and stylized, and it doesn't really work well in animation production. And similarly, because animation is very team-based, it's a collaborative process, you can't really work within your own style. Instead, you usually have to adjust and work within the style of the show. With freelance illustration, my favorite part is that I love that my clients want to work with me specifically for my style. Like, they seek me out for my work. And then finally, money was also a big factor. While I don't get like job benefits, I found that I was earning more as a freelancer than I would have full-time. And so in the summer, when I got back home from the residency, I made an action plan to myself. In autumn of 2018, I was going to move out of my parents' place and officially work full-time as an illustrator. And I did. I stopped the applications and job hunting and instead devoted all of my time and energy into freelance life instead. And honestly, it did take me a while to fully get myself into it. Like, I would still find myself looking at job listings now and then and thinking, whoa, did I make the right choice? And then when I'd see someone on Twitter announce that they were working on a cool new job, I might still feel that little pang of jealousy. But over time, it got easier. I became more invested into my own projects, and I found that I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I started creating some new goals and focused on my own progress instead of anyone else's. Like, I had goals like wanting to illustrate a novelty book, I wanted to win literary awards, I wanted to write my own book, I wanted to do readings for schools and libraries. I ended up finding a new community in the picture book world, and I ended up making a lot of new friends. And then a year later, I looked back at all of the progress I made with this post. And I believe that this was the best decision I ever made. And 3 years later, I still 100% agree. As much as I still love animation and I admire all of these amazing artists working in the industry, I just don't think I was meant to be in it. And I think that I'm much better suited in illustration. This is my dream now. In these past 3 years, I've worked on a book written by a celebrity, I have won an award for one of my picture books, and more recently, I wrote and illustrated my very first picture book, That's Not My Name, which is coming out this summer. Self-promotion time, if you want to support my work and check it out, there's a pre-order link below. Thank you very much. But yeah, I've definitely been thriving these past 3 years, and I don't think I would have been able to if I still had a foot in the animation puddle. I was being stretched too thin and not being able to properly invest myself in either industry. Like a wise man once said, never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. And the funny thing is that now as a freelance illustrator, I actually work very frequently in animation, just not how I initially imagined I would be. Instead of working full-time, I get contacted to do freelance development character design. Basically, development work is like the very early stages of animation before any actual art is done for like a potential project. The studio has a concept for a show and they're trying to figure out what the style could possibly look like. And so they reach out to artists with a unique style for their take on it. And so in this way, I've had the chance to work with a lot of great studios like Disney TV, DreamWorks TV, Netflix, and Warner Brothers. And funny enough, it's always been for preschool TV animation, because I kind of made a little niche for myself. Since I work as a picture book illustrator and have a very strong kidlit style, it's actually perfect for preschool shows. And I'm able to have a small part in helping to design some really great characters. And I think that development ended up being a really great compromise for working in animation, but still getting to work within my own style and having freelance flexibility. And another funny thing is that more recently in the past year, I have had 2 instances where I was contacted for the possibility of working with a major studio as a full-time artist. And you know what? I declined. Because at that time, I really liked where my illustration career was headed. I also had different priorities at that time. I was about to get married to my now husband, and I wasn't ready to relocate. And I just found it really interesting that 3 years ago, I would have leaped at the chance to work with these studios, working full-time as a character designer. But I had changed so much, and my dreams were different, my priorities were different, and maybe in the future, I might try to look into it again and try out animation again. But at that point, I realized that my path had diverged a little bit too much, and I was happy where I was. And that's basically my story, why I quit my dream of working in animation and why it was the best decision of my life. And who knows, my stance on this might change in the future, and I might decide I want to try working in full-time animation again. I mean, if Pixar wanted to offer me a job, I'm not gonna say no to that. But that's kind of my point. I think it's counterproductive to try to focus on one singular goal and just having those horse blinders on and keep going in a straight line to your final destination. Because if you're single-minded like that, you might end up missing forks along the way. Keep yourself open to new opportunities and possibilities. You have no idea where life can lead you, and you might find yourself doing something you love that you never would have thought to pursue otherwise. Another thing that I find a lot of comfort in is the idea that everything happens for a reason. My parents always drilled this into me that if a door is closed, don't try to force it open. It's likely closed for a reason because what's behind it might not be meant for me. Does that make sense? I might want something really, really bad, like working in animation. But if it isn't happening for me, I should accept that it's probably for my own good and that there might be a different, better door waiting for me down the hallway. I might not understand it now, but it'll all work out in the end. Just trust the process and go with the flow. And I think that's kind of what happened to me. If I had forced that door open, then I might not be where I am today. I might not be writing and illustrating a book. I might not be having all of these cool illustration opportunities. I wouldn't have met my husband. Just trust the process, that's all. So if you are watching this video and you are in the same boat that I was once in and you don't know what to do, I want you to do a couple of things. First, watch Monsters University. No, I'm not kidding. When people ask me what my favorite Pixar movie is, I point to this one. It completely deconstructs the concept of dreams in a way that I have never seen before. Spoilers, but basically, Mike wants to be a scarer. That's his dream since he was a little kid. He goes to college and he works harder than anyone else. He aces all of his exams, he's doing everything right. But the problem is he just isn't scary. And there is nothing that Mike can do about it to fix it. A similar analogy would be a short basketball player. In this movie, even though he works hard, Mike doesn't get to be a scarer at the end. Isn't that crazy? But it's not a sad ending because he learns that he has other skills. It turns out he is really good at the behind the scenes stuff, better than anyone else, and he ends up becoming Sully's technical partner working at their dream company. And Sully, who is naturally the scariest guy in school, is in awe of Mike and his skills. And in the sequel, scaring becomes obsolete anyway, and being funny is how monsters get their electricity now. And guess who's funny? Mike is. Mike just being himself worked out in the end. Sorry, I just have a lot of feelings about this movie. I love it so much. Anyway, After watching this movie, I then want you to examine why this dream is your dream. Figure out your core reason and see if there are any other ways of fulfilling this goal. And then you make your pros and cons list. Write down your priorities and see if that dream fits within it. Maybe a priority in your life is that you require structure, or maybe it's flexibility. Maybe a priority is that you want to stay in your hometown, or you want a job that allows creative freedom or travel or a stable income. It's easy to get hooked on the concept of a dream without really looking into what it actually means for your life. And especially if you have a creative-based dream, ask yourself if there is a way to incorporate it into your life in a smaller way that makes sense for you. I ask this because in our current capitalist culture, there's this sense that if you aren't making money from your craft, it's not valid. Like if you're not animating for a big studio, or if you're selling your art in galleries or marketing your pottery on Etsy, you're not a real artist. But even if you are painting for yourself after work and like no one sees it, it's not like on Instagram, or if it's not like on a website or anything, like you're still an artist. A job doesn't define that for you. And honestly, it's a known fact that as soon as you start to monetize your art, you start to hate doing it a little bit because now it's tied to money and it becomes work. There's a lot more pressure to it. Honestly, I hate drawing now. I mean, I love my job, but after working all day illustrating books, I do not want to draw for myself. And I miss drawing for myself. It's kind of sad. And I've had this conversation with a lot of people before who have told me that initially they wanted to be like a working artist, but they realized that they didn't want to end up having that hate for art. And so they ended up keeping that art for themselves as a hobby, and they just couldn't be happier. I also want you to keep an open mind. Keep yourself open to new doors, new opportunities, because you never know where it might lead you. It's crazy that there are like new niche jobs and industries created every day, and you might end up working in a job that didn't exist 10 years ago, and it is perfectly suited for you. And finally, just remember that it's okay to change your mind. There's nothing in the rules that says that you have to stick to the same dream that you've had for 10 years. Mix it up, do whatever you want. Like, I'm 28 years old, and I am a baby in the grand scheme of things. My life will go in 100 different directions, and I have no idea what's in store for me. In 20 years, I might decide that art isn't for me and I want to grow strawberries in France. Who knows? Your dreams will change and evolve just like you as a person do. And isn't that exciting? Thank you guys for watching this video. This was definitely super different from my usual content, but I hope it was a little bit helpful. If you have gone through something similar or you're struggling with this right now, please share your story below. I would love to hear it. I really love hearing about people's journey through like the art industry and everything and how their paths have changed. If you have enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel and giving this video a like. I make a lot of guides on how to work as an illustrator, and I share studio vlogs. Like I said, I have a book coming out this summer called That's Not My Name. If you want to check it out, I have a pre-order link below. In terms of social media, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I am at Foxville_art. And I also have a Patreon where I share exclusive artist content, and the link is below. But yeah, anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. I know this was a long one, but again, thank you for your continued support, and I will see you next time. Bye!